Okay, so we're just after 1 o'clock, so we'll kick off. Thank you everybody for joining us for this joint RTIG and Transport for the North webinar to talk about the Disruptions project and the new SIRI SX profile. This is being recorded and will be available online afterwards. If you can, please keep your microphone muted, and if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask in the chat function as we go along, and we'll pick them up at the end and do our best to answer them after the presentations. So I'm Tim Rivet, I'm the General Manager of RTIG and your host for this afternoon. So this afternoon we're just doing the introductions, then I'll hand over to Alex Saswillo from Transport for the North, who'll talk about their information programme, the Disruption Information Project, and the Open Data Portal that they've just released. And then he'll hand back to me and I'll pick up on SIRI and schemas and profiles, and where you can find out more about the SX profile that's been developed. And then we'll pick up questions and we'll wrap up by 2 o'clock. So Alex, he's one of the project managers at Transport for the North, and I'll just hand over to him to talk to you about what they've been doing.
Good. So hi everyone, I'm Alex Saswillo. I'm a senior project manager at Transport for the North on the integrated and smart travel program. So yeah, thank you for letting me come and speak to you here today. I'm just going to give you a bit of background about Transport for the North's integrated and smart travel program. Appreciate some of you might have heard some of this before, but I appreciate some of you won't have done as well, so I'll just try and bring everybody up to speed. I think the integrated smart travel program, for those of you who don't know, it's broken down into 4 phases. So phase 1 relates to smart cards on rail. So that was replacing paper season tickets with plastic smart cards. So for those of you who've travelled around the north, you'll have seen new gate lines going in, lots of new infrastructure really going in on the rail network to support the use of those smart cards. Phase 2 is the phase that I'm responsible for, focused on improving customer information for bus, light rail and ferry modes, and I'll speak to you a bit more about that in a minute. Phase 3 is all about building on the success of phase 1, so introducing contactless payments for rail, and then phase 4 will see us working with local transport authorities to deliver truly multimodal integrated smart ticketing solutions in areas across the north. Phase 2 has got 5 key projects in it. The first one is a fares project. So we're working with a supplier to deliver a tool which will enable bus operators to transform fares information into the new UK NetX data standard for fares information. We're working closely with the Department for Transport on that one to ensure that that tool complies with the Bus Services Act, because operators will be required to provide fares information in that format under that Act starting from next year. Secondly, the disruption messaging tool and Open Data Hub. So I'll be giving you lots more information about these, but generally, yes, the idea is to create disruption messages that can be shared openly. Phase 2 is also supported by a knowledge network, and the idea of the knowledge network is to enable local transport authorities and operators and other organisations who are working on these projects across the north to work together better. So there's things like shared libraries on there, forums for chatting, those kinds of things that you see in a lot of tools. But obviously, as we're working across multiple organisations, we needed a shared tool to do that. And finally, there's innovation. So on phase 2, we've had some money to trial out new things in the smart ticketing arena, particularly to help us with learning in the later stages of the programme. And on that, we've done some investigation into tap on, tap off, particularly on buses in the deregulated market, how that works when there aren't flat fares, what are the drivers behind customer behaviour and driver behaviour and things like that. So those are the things that we've been doing on innovation. But kind of focusing on the kind of core bits of the phase, really. I suppose just a bit of background information about why we're doing this, and that's really because passengers have been telling us that generally the information they're getting about bus or light rail isn't as good as the information that they're getting about heavy rail journeys, and that they'd like to be able to access that information digitally on the move, and using the apps that they're used to using in their everyday life. So things like Google, things like Citymap and Move It, all of those kind of tools that are used out there in the big wide world. We've also really picked up from our research with customers that the lack of information can be a barrier to them making a journey by public transport, either considering to use it at all or encouraging them to use it more. And I know that in the current climate, we're not necessarily encouraging people to use public transport, but generally, hopefully, once all this is over, we'll be doing that again. So we do want to kind of provide really a similar experience to what people are currently getting for rail, with more information, information available on multiple journey planners wherever they go online, and they can find an information either about cost or about disruptions, and they can compare the best journey options for themselves. So looking at disruption messaging at the moment, how is disruption information shared at the moment? So a lot of good work's being done by local transport authorities on disruption information at the moment. They are collating that and they're sharing that via their websites, via their social media channels, on their own internal or their own local journey planners, perhaps on their real-time systems, and also via posters and things like that at bus stations and the like. But the problem is that although that information is really good and of high quality, it's not always getting to the best places and to the right people at the right time when they want it. For instance, customers might be having to scroll through Twitter feeds or go and check a website or go and check a disruption poster for that information. So what we want to do with the disruption messaging tool is really allow that information to be shared much more quickly and more easily, and be integrated into other places. So the disruption messaging tool is really creating messages with in the electronic format, the SIRI SX-standard, that can be shared and reused in multiple places. It's then published openly on our Open Data Hub, and to make sure that it's picked up, we've been doing a lot of engagement work with key members and players within the open data community to make sure that this data is going to be used and actually viewed by customers. The other thing the disruption messaging tool is doing as well is it integrates directly with social media platforms, so currently Facebook and Twitter, and this is removing the need really for users to have to, or multiple teams within local transport authorities to be putting the same information in to various different systems and solutions. So there's the idea that information can go directly from this tool into lots of other places. So I think at a high level, this shows the design of the tool. So our model is very much business to business, and then to customer eventually, but we're not interfacing directly with the customer. We've worked with our supplier ItoWorld who's built and developed the tool for us. So that's really the green box in the middle. And information comes into that tool through various forms. Firstly, users can input and link into that tool directly via a user interface. And then secondly, there are a number of kind of foundation, I like to think of them as foundation data sources that the SIRI SX data is kind of built on top of. So we've got TransExchange, obviously the route and timetables, NAPTAN for the stop information and the operator codes. We're also looking at expanding that to other data sources, which I'll talk to you a little bit about a bit later. And obviously that tool is then matching the information that the user's putting on against that route and timetable and stop data, etc., outputting it in a SIRI SX format to that Open Data Hub, who we've worked with Trapeze and Transport API to develop, and that's then shared openly, published to data consumers who can then put that in their apps, use it for academic purposes, whatever they want to use it for. But primarily, we want it obviously to get to customers in the on their phones when they're out and about in the places that they want to check that information. We're also thinking about how we can take this tool further now. So at the moment, looking at where we're the extra things that we want to build into this tool. We're looking at integrating it with Hootsuite, which is a social media management platform that a lot of local transport authorities use. So that enables them to manage all of their different social media platforms and channels and communications in one place. There's often so we're looking to improve that social media integration in the future. We're also looking at integrating the DFT Street Manager data set. So DFT is currently very near to kind of introducing the roadworks feed of data. So local authorities will be required to use Street Manager. So there'll be a lot of highway authorities will be inputting disruptions to the highway network into the Street Manager system. What we want to do is take that feed of Street Manager data into the disruption messaging tool so that it can help generate disruption messages much more quickly, perhaps with greater automation, so there's less user interaction, so that there's greater efficiency really for local authorities when they're in the creation of these messages. We're also going to be doing some general user enhancements to the tool. Things that users are asking for, improvements to reporting, any kind of sharing of information wider. We're looking at those. So we do want to see a future for this tool and make it better, and keep that roadmap going. So at a high level, then here's the kind of plan of where we are. So we've come quite a long way since April last year when we started the project with ItoWorld. We've gone through alpha and beta phases. The live tool, or the live release, was completed at the end of January, and we then worked with local transport authorities to get them ready to actually start using the tool in a live environment from March. So at the moment, we've got Transport for Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and Mersey Travel all inputting data, live data, disruption messages into this tool. All of those authorities have started with planned disruptions, and that's an operational decision really about how those things are introduced within those teams. Those are large authorities as well, and they do have control centres and 24-hour operations. So we're working with them to introduce unplanned disruptions as soon as possible. TFGM, for instance, are looking to start doing unplanned disruptions within the tool by the end of June at the moment. So I mean, obviously we're testing the processes operationally with them. But those are the plans. So all of them are putting a definite planned disruption, and some of them are starting to test out some of the processes for unplanned disruption. We're also looking to go live with the other city region LTAs, so Nexus in the northeast and South Yorkshire, so in the Sheffield City region, later in the summer or over the summer, and we'll be introducing enhancements throughout the summer as well. So some of those things I spoke about the Hootsuite integration, and also the integration with the Street Manager platform will be released later in the year, as soon as the Street Manager APIs are made available to us, which we're expecting to happen in July. On the Open Data Hub as well, we started work on this with TransModel API and Trapeze in May. So this has gone through a number of iterations. We've had the tool went live at the end of March, and that was initially with request and response APIs. That has now been expanded as of this week. So we now have filtered APIs, which allow data consumers to filter based on specific regions within the north. And we've also got subscription APIs, which I think a lot of people prefer. Well, I think from our perspective, provides greater resilience across the tool as well. We're kind of really encouraging people now, while we're in this open beta phase, which started this week, to sign up and look at the data and use the data, and really kind of put them through their paces, really. Because at the end of June, we're then looking to kind of finalise those APIs, and those will be the APIs that go forward into the for the foreseeable future. So at the moment, there's only disruption data on the Open Data Hub. We will be later in the year introducing FAIRS data from the FAIRS tool. So that will either be by APIs, or they may be by flat files, depending on what data consumers tell us and what the research tells us. But we'll be looking, there'll be FAIRS data coming later in the year, I think, is something to be aware of. Just a couple of examples here of how disruption messaging tool data is being used already. So MoveIt has already integrated the feeds into their live customer-facing apps. So that's good to see, and so has Bus Times. So again, these disruption messages are now actually reaching genuine customers, and we're continuing to speak to other developers about how soon they can do that. So people are welcome to get in contact and understand how they can do that. And if you'd like to register for the Open Data Hub, you can go to the address on the screen there, so opendata.transportforthenorth.com, and register for an API key, so that we can, you can start having a look at those APIs and start having a look at the data that is being produced. So that's it from me. I think, have there been some questions? Or are we doing that at the end?
Yeah, there has a good one to pick up at this point, Alex, is what's the protocol for the Open Data Hub, Bespoke API or SIRI SX?
So that I'm afraid I'll have to take away, because I don't want to answer a technical question that I don't know the answer to. So that's okay.
Okay, well, I'll pick up on that.
One
of the outputs is SIRI SX, which is why we'll be picking up on that one in a minute. But there'll be, as other data sources come on stream, there'll be other formats as well. Okay, and then from question about is TFN any closer to adding a specific real-time feed within the disruption messaging tool? The length of message and call to action can be different for other outputs.
So what we haven't yet made a decision about where so I think things on the roadmap are the things on the roadmap. How we look to expand the tool further is currently something that we are looking at. So we haven't made a decision about that, but those are things that we'll consider with local transport authorities about what they want, and it's obviously subject to us obtaining additional funding to take things forward. But it is something that we are looking at, how we can keep the tool going, because it's been well received by users so far. We're seeing, we're pleased with the work that's been done by suppliers on this. It's working well. I mean, there are obviously always teething problems, and that's why we want people to some of these things. But generally, we do want to take these things forward and make them even more useful for people.
Yeah. And last one for the moment, will the disruption information be used to correct arrival time predictions?
So it won't be used to correct arrival time predictions, is my understanding, unless there's a way that the data can be people can innovate with that data. But I do understand that people, it's obviously attached to individual services and lines and journeys, so it can be attached, but it's not. This is a disruption message rather than a change to any actual arrival time predictions, or anything like linked with the vehicle location or real-time information countdown. That's my understanding.
Okay. From an operator perspective, where do they sit in the model? If they decide on diversions as a result of disruptions, would the information lie with the operator and the responsibility for updating things?
So what we've done within TFN is work with local transport authorities with their existing models in place for how they work with operators. So our local transport authorities have very good links with their operators, so and work with them on gathering that disruption information. So we expect that continues to be the case. So it's actually the local transport authorities who will be putting that information into the tool, but that will be throughout the usual arrangements they have with operators on those diversions. I think if we're talking about how journey planners can interpret diversions, there is a field within SIRI SX which obviously allows journeys to be removed or from the journey planner based on a disruption message, and then I think that really is up to the journey planners to decide how to reroute that person. So if we're saying there's a disruption message on this journey and we want to also the local transport authorities decides to remove that entire journey, or route from the route and timetable information suppress that individual those journeys, then the journey planner itself will be able to work out diversions based on other available services.
Okay, thank you, Alex. If we pick up on the SIRI SX side of things now, I will take control, and so hopefully people can see that. So I'm just going to introduce you to SIRI SX, what it's about, and roughly how it works and how you can find out more. So SIRI SX is part of the TransModel family of tools and data modeling. There are things that Alex has already talked about, like NetX for fares, and journey planner data available. And the idea of TransModel is it covers all of the bits of data that you're likely to want to have for public transport operation. SX Situation Exchange is part of the passenger information, part of TransModel. SIRI is a European standard. It's increasingly being used across the world. Australia and America are starting to use it heavily, and there's a number of different functions available within SIRI. Planned and real-time timetables, PT and ET. Probably the most used in the UK, vehicle activity at stops, stop monitoring, and vehicle movement, VM, which we will all be hearing more about over the coming months as part of the Department of Transport's Bus Open Data Programme. And then less frequently used functions to do with connections and facilities and messaging. And the last of those, which in the UK we've not really used since the Olympics back in 2012, Situation Exchange, which is the function that Transport for the North are using to push out the disruption data. Situation Exchange is a structured way of presenting disruption information, and it is designed for exchanging information between systems, and you can link that to the key access points and ways of thinking about things that a passenger or a system might want. So things like bus stops and lines, routes, journeys, and the pathways that a public transport journey might take. So if you've got, for example, roadworks on a road, the person doing those roadworks won't necessarily think about the public transport line element of it. They'll think about the road side of it. A few key things to think about. SIRI SX isn't designed for direct display to the passenger. The expectation is that the data is being used by another system to interpret it and decide what to do. So, for example, SIRI SX can't directly help with rerouting a journey and telling the customer about that. It needs to be processed by a journey planner and a customer information system that can actually tell the customer what this means for their journey. It's also not really appropriate for specific journey changes and cancellations. You can do that more appropriately in some of the other things in SIRI. So as part of this work with Transport for the North, we have developed a profile which fits within the schema, and it's often a question that I've had as part of this work and other things with SIRI and TransExchange and things like that. Why aren't you using a schema? So a schema covers the complete breadth of things that you can do within a data set, be that SIRI or TransExchange. It's designed to cover all sorts of different use cases, and it's also designed to be able to be automated for checking and things like that. So various mandated data elements, you can check whether they're there as part of the schema. And what we've developed is compliant with the SIRI version 2 schema. That might be a bit of a change for some suppliers and systems in the UK, where 1.3 is still more commonly used, but it's not that different. We have developed a profile that sits on top of the schema, and the reason that we're using a profile is that it enables us to be more particular about how we want data presented. So, for example, because SIRI is an international standard, in the schema you can't specify a UK bus stop number and then automatically check that it's a valid UK reference. But in the part of the profile, we can say, if you're going to say something about a bus stop, you're going to have to use the ATCO code from NAPTAN, because that's not appropriate in a schema, because in France they don't use NAPTAN, they use something else. And it allows us to include the bits of data that we think we really have to have. What are the minimums for the Transport for the North system to work, as well as the things that are nice to have if somebody can supply that as part of the data set. So conceptually, SIRI SX takes a little bit of getting your head round, because it works almost the opposite way round to the way that you might naturally think about things. So it starts with the disruption, and then what are the consequences of that disruption, and then what is that disruption and consequence going to affect. And I should say thank you to Ito for these this bit of content. So you start off with a disruption and describing the disruption. Is it an active disruption or is it a closed one? Because you can also use this to move data around for historic disruptions. How long is this disruption going to last? Either a one-off, or you could have a road closed or a bus stop closed every third Tuesday, something like that. Why is this disruption happening? What's the reason? Is it planned, which is the focus for Transport for the North at the moment, or is it unplanned? Has it happened because something has happened that you weren't expecting? And then you can describe that in a number of different ways. There's summary options, which may be the most appropriate way to deal for the time being with real-time display content. You can also put a more lengthy textual description in there, and you can point people to a website or a web page where they can get more information about it if it's not something that you can easily distill. And you can also link that a disruption to other disruptions. So you might have a series of roadworks, or flooding might cause a series of roads to be closed or diversions to be in place. You can link those together. Once you've dealt with the disruption, you then go, actually, what is the consequence of this disruption? How severe is it? Is it just a minor delay that's going to be caused, or actually is it going to mean that public transport journey or route has to be cancelled, which is the blocking element which Alex was referring to earlier for journey planners. What's the advice that you're going to give somebody? It could be allow more time for your journey if it's a delay, or it could be stay at home because the city centre's flooded, or it's snowed so much that very few services are running. What is the magnitude of the delay, and what are the what's the scope of the disruption and the consequence of the disruption? And so that can be all sorts of things, from a whole area, something you might use at the moment for some of the COVID messaging, or it might be at an operator level. There's a strike, or they've gone out of business. Could be all the way down to a stop, an individual stop. It's closed for maintenance, or it's being relocated. So you can get really quite granular, as well as dealing with things at the very high level, wide magnitude. So we've developed the profile. It's described in profile document. Those of you that are used to dealing with XML data will be used to reading documents like this. It's available from the RTIG website. It's got the use cases in it that have been used to help develop the profile and to validate it. And it then describes in detail the individual elements of data that are required and how you might use them. And then there's a lengthy bit at the back with example XML, so you can see how it's presented in a file, and start to understand how you might manually read it if you need to help understand the data that you're providing and whether it's right. And at this point in time, whilst it has been published, we are wanting people to test the document and the profile, to check it, and to help it evolve, because these things rarely stay still. People come up with new use cases, new things that they want to do with disruption data, and over time people find that they're able to provide more and different data, and richer data, and so we don't expect it to be static and stay the same for years at a time. So we are wanting people to read it, test it, and check it, and help us evolve it. SIRI is quite a complex topic. Disruptions are something that people are beginning to pay a lot more attention to. So if you need more, where can you get that? There's a number of RTIG publications that are available to everybody. You don't have to be a member to access those. So if you're thinking about handling disruptions, what are some of the issues involved? What might you do with those? And then some best practice guidance that came out of the experiences in the Olympics in 2012, as well as this document. The formal technical documents are available through BSI, but through the SIRI website and GitHub, there's all sorts of things available, guidance documents, drafts of the technical documents and things like that, if you don't want to go the full hog and buy the full BSI standard. So that's profile and where we're at. Before we get on to any more questions, there's a number of things and takeaways from this session. Please do apply through the Transport for the North portal for access to the data. Please do use the data. It's there, it wants to be used. Help people in the North get a better customer experience and see what you can do with the data, because one of the things that Alex and the team are very interested in is what are the different and new ways of presenting that information, working with customers to help them make better journeys that might come out of having this disruption information available. Read and test the profile document, and if you can get us as much feedback as possible by the end of June, then that will be very useful. That's the end of the beta phase of the Transport for the North portal, and so it would be really good to get as much feedback as possible by then. And this is certainly one of these cases where the more people that are using the data, the more data that will be available. At the moment, there's 3 authorities providing data, with another couple signed up to start supplying data. But if people and authorities and operators start to see applications, websites, journey planners, things like that using the data, then there's going to be more imperative and urgency for them to be supplying more data into the portal. So it is hopefully going to be a bit of a circular setup. More use, more data. So there's a couple of, there's at least one more question that's come in. How will transport operators feed disruptions from their systems into the service? I think that might be one for you, Alex, or Richard.
Yeah, so operators will not have direct access to the tool itself. What they do is they continue to work with their existing arrangements with the local transport authorities. So with the control rooms, for instance, with West Yorkshire or Transport for Greater Manchester and Mersey Travel. So it's through those existing links that the operators have with their local transport authorities that data will get into this tool. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. How was SIRI SX used for the 2012 Olympics? So that was used to share disruption data across the different systems. For those of you with longish memories, the Olympic Journey Planner was a federated structure involving multiple different suppliers' journey planners, all linked together, fundamentally similar to the Transport Direct setup, and so there needed to be a way of transferring disruption data that changed more frequently than the scheduled data, and so it was used for that. It's also been used pseudo SX form in Scotland as part of the Transport for Scotland Journey Planner and website. Another question that I think is probably for you, Alex. Is there not a problem with operators having to go through local authorities for disruption information, e.g. operating hours?
Yeah, hi Sonia. I think yes, there will be, depending on the size of the local authority. So at the moment, this is why we are rolling out with planned disruptions at the moment, because it supports the kind of 9 to 5 business model. So the authorities who are looking to introduce unplanned disruptions as well are the larger cities at the moment in the north, so Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire and Mersey Travel, where they have longer business hours. So TFGM, for instance, have 24-hour control centre. I think we'd have to, so for each local authority, we'd need to look at how, what their business model supports. There's nothing to stop operators being authorised to use the tool directly. There's that's something that could be looked at. But really, we'd work with each local transport authority in their local area to agree what the best way was to get information into the tool.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from anybody? While we're waiting for that, as I said at the start, the session is being recorded. We'll make that available to people. You'll get an email from Eventbrite with a link to that. If you've got any other questions, then we'll include our contact details in there, and so you can send us an email, and we'll be happy to do our best to answer those. As Alex said, they're keen to work with other authorities to understand how might be able to be used in other places in the north, and different use cases and examples. So I think, will TFN be taking information from Datex 2 National Disruption System?
So there's no plans at the moment to take it from Datex 2. We're looking for Street Manager integration at the moment, because we know that that's going to be a statutory requirement for local authorities to use that solution. That was something that our local transport authorities in the north kind of agreed that was the best route at the moment. So we'll do the integration with Street Manager and see where, and then obviously, like I said, we're looking to improve the tool, where we can take it further, subject to funding, and depending on what users ask for as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for your presentation and participating in this. If I can wrap this session up with a bit of a plug for our next session like this, where we're going to be looking at passenger counting on buses, a particularly hot topic with social distancing and things like that. We're going to hear in that session from TfL and some of the work that they did over the last couple of years, R2P and 21st Century, on their experiences of providing passenger counting, and have a look at some of the ways of presenting information from around the world that you might have seen on the news or be interested in. So please sign up for that, and look forward to seeing you all on the 2nd of June. Thank you. Thank you for watching this RTIG webinar. To find out more about RTIG and our work, then please visit our website at rtig.org.uk. Thank you.